My name is Deb Schimpf, and I'm the Executive Director with Schenectady Community Action. And we were part of a coalition of organizations known as the Community Crisis Network that stepped in the early days following the tropical storms to do some assessment and neighborhood canvassing. What we needed to know was what condition everybody was in terms of their basic needs and how the flooding had affected their homes. So we went door to door for about 3 weeks. We were home based at the Rotterdam Junction Fire Department, and we went door to door throughout the affected neighborhoods and tried to talk to residents. And then we did some hours also in the firehouse to try and get people to come to us. Not everybody was actually, of course, living in their homes. So we spent about 3 weeks doing that. And then we took the assessments that we were able to complete and we ranked them 1 to 3. 3 being the highest, most immediate need, 1 being a lower level of need. And then we went about trying to reconnect with the households to see what we could do to try and help them establish some sense of normalcy. My impression of the typical emotional response that I saw from people who were affected by the storms, there was universal concern for each other. Almost exclusively, nearly everybody that we spoke to said, "I'm good, I really don't need anything, but I'm very concerned about my neighbor." You could tell that they had been through a lot, but they were very stoic. There were a couple of cases where people felt more stressed in the short term, particularly if they had a child or children and they were affected. But my impression universally was that everybody was very concerned for someone else, not themselves. When I think back of those first couple of weeks, it's where I have most of the stories in terms of how I think people were affected. But I would say there isn't one particular household or one particular story that I came away with, as much as just a group of people who were, again, so much more concerned about someone else. But I think that what I knew from the very beginning is that Rotterdam Junction in particular, but also the Stockade and Scotia, had a community of support that already existed, and all I was doing was trying to bring in some organization to that and some resources. So yes, there were a few households and a few people that affected me, mostly the seniors, who again were affected very dramatically, especially in Rotterdam Junction. A few also, though, in the other areas that were hard hit. But there were several seniors that I just could not get out of my head afterwards. They probably don't remember me because they've worked with a lot of people over almost the year now that's gone by. But I remember a gentleman named John, and I remember a woman named Elizabeth, who I could not literally get out of my head. Elizabeth was more concerned about baking me a pie and my colleagues a pie and some desserts. And John was really hard to convince that he needed any help at all. And very, very special people. I've been asked the question before what I would take away from the whole experience of working with the flood victims. And the best thing that I can say for myself that I've thought a lot about is that when you're affected by a natural disaster or some other kind of disaster, the most important thing is your immediate neighbors and your family. You'll get help eventually from outside groups, but initially, right then and there, in the aftermath, during the event and in the aftermath, you really want to be thinking about your neighbors, and you want your neighbors to be thinking about you. So if you are someone who thinks, I really don't want to talk to my neighbor, oh gosh, my neighbor's outside, I don't want to talk to them, think again, because that right there was what saved a lot of people from being injured when the floods hit. Neighbors were helping neighbors, neighbors were rescuing neighbors, and especially in Rotterdam Junction, for instance, it's all volunteer, exclusive volunteer fire department. So that's what I came away with. You bet I'm paying more attention to my especially elderly neighbors and all of my neighbors, and making sure they know me and making sure that I know them.